Hi, this is Jamie Parker from the Millbrook Middle School Gazette. I've been investigating something really weird happening at our school, and I think you need to hear about this. Like, seriously weird stuff that's making parents keep their kids home and teachers act all nervous when they think we're not looking. So last Tuesday, right after Ms. Harrison's history class, parents all over our district started getting these phone calls. Anonymous calls telling them, "Don't send your child to school tomorrow." That's it. Just that one sentence, and then whoever was calling would hang up. My mom got one. Tommy Rodriguez's mom got one. Even Principal Hayes' neighbor got one about her kid who goes to the elementary school. At first, everyone thought it was just some prank. You know how high schoolers can be sometimes. But then more calls came. And more. By Wednesday morning, like 30% of students were absent. The office was going crazy trying to figure out what was happening. Mrs. Henderson, who's been the secretary here forever, told me she'd never seen anything like it in 23 years of working at Millbrook. That's when I knew I had to investigate. I mean, this is exactly the kind of story the school newspaper should be covering, right? Something that's actually affecting our school instead of just writing about the cafeteria serving mystery meat again. Plus, I was really curious about who would make calls like that and why. It felt like there was a real story here. I started by interviewing some of the parents who got calls. Mrs. Rodriguez was really nice about talking to me. She said the voice sounded young, maybe like a teenager, but there was something wrong with it. It was too perfect, she told me. Like someone reading from a script, but not quite right. And Jamie, honey, the thing that really bothered me was that they knew Tommy's name. They said, "Don't send Tommy to school tomorrow. Not just your child. How would some random person know my son's name?" That gave me chills, but I kept investigating. I talked to more parents and they all said the same thing. The caller knew their kid's name. Every single time. Sarah June's mom said the voice asked specifically about Sarah. Marcus Thompson's dad said they mentioned Marcus by name. It wasn't just a general warning, it was personal. The weird thing was, when I tried to ask the principal about it, she seemed really scattered. Principal Hayes is usually super organized, always checking her watch and talking about schedules and procedures. But when I asked about the calls, she just stared at me for a few seconds and then said, "What calls?" "Oh, those calls. Yes, we're handling it through proper channels." And then she walked away really fast, like she was late for something important. But here's where it gets really strange. I started noticing that even though lots of kids were absent, the ones who did come to school were acting different. Not all of them, but some. Like they were more focused on following the rules than usual. They'd sit up straighter in class, raise their hands at exactly the right time, and they all seemed to be paying really close attention to the announcements that come over the PA system. Speaking of announcements, that's when I realized something else was off. I've been going to this school for 2 years now, and I know the schedule pretty well. But lately, the announcements have been weird. They happen at the right times, but sometimes they repeat. Not exactly the same words, but the same information, like all students report to homeroom would be announced at 8:15, which is normal. But then at 8:17, it would be, students should proceed to homeroom period, same thing, just said differently, and the bell schedule. Oh man, the bell schedule has been driving me crazy. It's supposed to ring at specific times, 8:15 for homeroom, 8:30 for first period, stuff like that. But I started timing it with my phone, and sometimes it rings a few seconds early or late. Not by much, but enough that I noticed. When I asked Mr. Peterson about it, he just said, "Time is relative, Jamie. What matters is that we maintain our routine." That's when I decided to really dig into this story. I started carrying around my digital recorder. You know, the one I use for interviews for the school paper. I figured if weird stuff was happening, I should document it. And let me tell you, I'm glad I did, because what I recorded over the next few days was absolutely insane. First, I interviewed Tommy Rodriguez from the elementary school. He's only 8, but he's really smart, and he notices things. Tommy told me something that made my stomach drop. He said, "Jamie, There's a new kid in my class. He sits in the back and he always smiles, but Mrs. Garcia acts like he's not there. Like, she'll count heads for attendance and count right past him, but there's definitely a kid sitting there. I asked Tommy to describe this new kid, and he said, he's got brown hair, and he's wearing a blue shirt. But Jamie, here's the really weird part. He's in my math class too, in my reading class. And I saw him in the cafeteria at lunch sitting with the 5th graders. How can one kid be in all those places? That's when I knew this wasn't just about mysterious phone calls anymore. I started asking other students about new kids, and the stories I heard were unbelievable. Sarah June from my grade told me about a boy who sits in the back of her science class. He's always smiling, she said. Like, always. Even when Mr. Rodriguez is talking about dissecting frogs or whatever. And get this, I asked Jessica, who sits next to him, what his name is, and she looked at me like I was crazy. She said there's nobody sitting there. But the really scary part was when I talked to Marcus Thompson, who's in high school. He told me he's been seeing the same kid in his classes for weeks now. Jamie, I swear this kid is in my English class, my history class, my math class, every single one, and he never talks, never raises his hand, but he's always writing in this notebook. The teachers never call on him, never even look at him. It's like he's invisible to them, but not to us. I decided I had to see this for myself, so I started paying attention during my classes, looking for anyone who might be this mysterious new kid. And then, during 3rd period math, I saw him. He was sitting in the back corner, exactly like everyone described. Brown hair, blue shirt, and this smile that never went away. He was writing in a notebook, and every few minutes he'd look up and scan the room like he was looking for something. The creepiest part was that Mrs. Patterson, our math teacher, completely ignored him. She was taking attendance, and she counted every single student in the room except him. When she got to his row, she just skipped right over him like he wasn't there. But he was there. I could see him clear as day. I tried to get closer to see what he was writing, but every time I looked in his direction, he'd look up and make eye contact with me. And that smile. It wasn't a mean smile or a scary smile exactly, but it was wrong. Like he was happy about something that shouldn't make someone happy. After class, I followed him out into the hallway. I wanted to talk to him, find out who he was and why teachers couldn't see him. But when I got to the hallway, he was gone. Just vanished. I asked other students if they'd seen where he went, but they all said they hadn't seen anyone matching his description. That's when I started recording everything. I'd turn on my recorder at the beginning of each class and just let it run. And what I caught on those recordings still gives me nightmares. In the background of my regular class recordings, you can hear this voice. It's really quiet, like someone whispering. But if you turn the volume up, you can make out words. The voice says things like, the pattern must continue, and routine makes us strong, and tests are coming soon. But here's the thing. When I play these recordings back, I can't remember hearing any of those whispers during class. It's like they're only there on the recording, not in real life. I showed these recordings to Sarah, and she got really freaked out. She said, Jamie, this is way beyond normal weird stuff. This is like supernatural weird. And she's right. I've been trying to find logical explanations for everything, but there aren't any. Anonymous callers who know kids' names, a student who's invisible to teachers, voices on recordings that nobody heard. None of it makes sense, but it gets worse. Remember how I said some students were acting different? Well, more and more kids are starting to act that way. They're becoming obsessed with following the rules, with being on time, with doing exactly what they're supposed to do. They sit perfectly still in class, they never goof off, and they all seem to be listening really carefully to those weird announcements. I tried to talk to some of these kids to ask them if they'd noticed anything strange, but they just stared at me with these blank expressions and said things like, everything is normal, Jamie, or we should focus on our studies. It's like they're turning into robots or something. Yesterday, I finally got up the courage to stay after class and try to talk to the new kid directly. I waited until everyone else had left Mrs. Patterson's math class, and there he was, still sitting in the back corner, still writing in his notebook. I walked up to him and said, Hi, I'm Jamie. I'm a reporter for the school newspaper. Can I ask you some questions? He looked up at me with that constant smile, and for a second, I thought he wasn't going to respond. But then, he nodded just once. I asked him what his name was, and he opened his mouth like he was going to answer, but no sound came out. He tried again, and this time I heard the faintest whisper, "Help me." And then, just as I was about to ask him more questions, the bell rang. But it wasn't the regular bell, it was longer, deeper, and it seemed to be coming from everywhere at once. The new kid's smile faltered for just a second, and I could see something in his eyes that looked like fear. Pure, desperate fear. When the bell stopped, his smile was back, but he was shaking his head slightly. He closed his notebook and stood up, and as he walked past me toward the door, I heard him whisper, "Don't trust the routine." I tried to follow him again, but this time when I got to the hallway, not only was he gone, but the hallway was completely empty. No other students, no teachers, nobody. It was like the whole school had suddenly become deserted. I could hear the normal sounds of classes going on behind the closed doors, but the hallways were like a ghost town. I started walking toward the main office, but something was wrong with the hallway. It seemed longer than usual, and the fluorescent lights were flickering in this weird pattern. Not randomly. There was definitely a rhythm to it. And as I walked, I kept hearing that whispered voice from my recordings. But this time it was all around me, like it was coming from the walls themselves. "Tests are coming," it whispered. "The pattern must be preserved. Routine makes us strong." I just ran straight to the newspaper office and locked the door behind me. I sat there for like 20 minutes trying to figure out what was happening to our school. And that's when I realized something that made my blood run cold. The phone calls warning parents to keep their kids home. What if they weren't pranks? What if someone was trying to protect us from something? What if staying home really was the safe thing to do? I started thinking about everything I'd observed. The kids who were absent seemed fine when they came back, but the kids who stayed in school, especially the ones who were acting strange, they were all following the routine more and more perfectly, like they were being trained or programmed or something. And the new kid, what if he wasn't part of whatever was happening? What if he was trying to warn us? He did say "help me," and "don't trust the routine." Maybe he's trapped somehow, and he's trying to get someone to notice what's really going on. I've been investigating this for a week now, and I'm more confused and scared than when I started. But I know one thing for sure. Something is seriously wrong at Millbrook Middle School. And whatever it is, it's getting stronger. More kids are acting strange every day, the announcements are getting weirder, and that new kid is showing up in more and more classes. I don't know what those anonymous callers were trying to protect us from, but I think they were right. I think there are days when we shouldn't go to school. Days when staying home is the safest thing we can do. If you're listening to this and you're a student at Millbrook or any of the other schools in our district, pay attention to what's happening around you. Notice if there are kids in your classes that teachers don't seem to see. Listen carefully to the announcements and the bell schedule. And if you get a phone call telling you not to go to school tomorrow, maybe you should listen. I'm going to keep investigating this story because I think our school newspaper has a responsibility to report on what's really happening, even if the adults don't want to hear it. But I'm also going to be really careful, because I think whatever is happening at our school, it's not done yet. And I think the new kid was trying to warn me about something that's coming. This is Jamie Parker, reporting for the Millbrook Middle School Gazette. Stay safe, and remember, if something feels wrong, it probably is. Hi, this is Jamie Parker from the Millbrook Middle School Gazette. I've been investigating something really weird happening with our school buses, and I need to tell you about it before more kids get hurt. If you've been getting picked up by a bus that doesn't feel right, or if you've been having weird gaps in your memory during your ride to school, you need to listen to this whole thing. 3 days ago, right after I published my first report about the phone calls warning parents to keep their kids home, I started getting messages from younger students. They were telling me about a school bus that was picking them up on routes that shouldn't exist. At first I thought maybe the district had just changed some routes and forgot to tell everyone. But then Tommy Rodriguez came up to me during lunch with this scared look on his face. Tommy's this kid from elementary who's been riding the same bus route for 2 years. He knows his bus driver, Mrs. Peterson, and he knows exactly which streets his bus takes to get to school. But last Tuesday morning, he told me a different bus showed up at his stop. Same yellow color, same number on the side, but something felt wrong about it. The doors opened with this weird hissing sound, and the driver didn't look at him when he got on. Tommy said the driver just stared straight ahead with this blank expression, like he was looking at something nobody else could see. I decided to investigate because that's what reporters do, right? I started by asking around to see if other kids had similar experiences. My friend Sarah June from AV Club helped me set up some recording equipment so I could document everything properly. Sarah's really good with tech stuff, and she had this idea to map out all the bus routes in our district to see if we could find any patterns. The first kid I interviewed was this 6th grader named Ashley. She told me she'd been picked up by the wrong bus 3 times in the past week. Each time she'd get on thinking it was her regular bus, but then she'd realize she didn't recognize any of the other kids on it. She said they all sat perfectly still looking straight ahead, and nobody talked during the whole ride. The weird thing was, she couldn't remember getting off the bus or walking into school. She'd just suddenly find herself in her first period class, like she'd lost 20 minutes of her morning. Then, there was this kid Marcus from high school. He's usually pretty cool and laid back, but when he talked to me about the bus, his voice got all flat and monotone. He said he'd been riding the mystery bus for a week now, and it was much more efficient than the regular route. He kept checking his watch and talking about how important it was to maintain the schedule. The creepy part was, he said he'd started setting his alarm 15 minutes earlier every day to make sure he wouldn't be late for the bus pickup. When I asked him why, he just stared at me with these empty eyes and said, "The routine must be maintained." But the scariest account came from this little girl named Emma from 2nd grade. She's Tommy's friend, and she was so scared she could barely talk. She told me that last Monday she got on what she thought was her regular bus, but when she looked around, all the other kids were sitting in perfect rows, their hands folded in their laps, staring straight ahead. She said their eyes looked glassy, like dolls. The bus driver never said anything, just drove in this weird pattern that made her feel sick. She remembered passing the same intersection 4 times, but somehow they still arrived at school on time. The really weird part was what Emma told me next. She said that while she was on the bus, she heard this voice whispering from the back seat. She couldn't see who was talking, but the voice sounded like a boy around my age. He was saying things like, "Don't let the pattern take you, and remember who you are before the routine." She said the voice sounded sad, like whoever was talking was trying not to cry. Sarah and I spent the whole weekend mapping bus routes and comparing them to the district's official schedule. We found something really disturbing. The mystery bus was following a pattern that connected to our school's bell schedule, but in a way that didn't make sense. It would appear at stops exactly 7 minutes after the morning bell rang, which is impossible because the bell rings after kids are already at school. It was like the bus was operating on some kind of reverse schedule. While we were researching, I kept my recorder running, and I caught something really strange. During our Saturday study session in the empty school library, I heard that same whispered voice Emma had described. It was coming through my recording equipment, even though Sarah and I were the only ones in the building. The voice said, "The pattern feeds on movement, and routine makes us food." I asked Sarah if she heard it, but she just looked at me like I was crazy. On Sunday, I decided to test something. I went to one of the stops where kids had reported seeing the mystery bus, and I waited with my recorder running. At exactly 7:23 a.m., which is 7 minutes after our school bell would ring on a weekday, I heard the sound of a bus approaching. But when I looked up the street, I couldn't see anything. The sound got louder and louder, like a bus was pulling right up to the stop, but there was nothing there. Then I heard the door opening with that weird hissing sound the kids had described. My recorder was picking up everything. The engine idling, the squeak of the door, even the sound of kids shuffling onto the bus, but I couldn't see anything with my eyes. The whispered voice came through my headphones again, clearer this time. Not ready for the test yet. Then everything went quiet. I've been thinking about what that voice meant by the test, and I think I'm starting to understand. The kids who've been riding the mystery bus, they're all changing. They're becoming obsessed with schedules and routines. They show up to class exactly on time, never a minute early or late. They do their homework perfectly, never missing an assignment. They eat their lunch at the same time every day, in the same spot, with the same mechanical movements. Marcus told me on Monday that he'd been having the most efficient week ever. He said his grades were improving because he was following a perfect schedule. He goes to bed at exactly 9:17 p.m. and wakes up at 6:43 a.m. and arrives at his classes with precision timing. When I asked him if he was happy about his improved routine, he just smiled this blank smile and said, "Happiness is irrelevant. The schedule is what matters." The worst part is, I think the mystery bus has been trying to pick me up. Yesterday morning, I was waiting at my regular bus stop when I heard that familiar hissing sound. My regular bus wasn't supposed to arrive for another 10 minutes, but there it was. Same yellow color, same number, but something felt wrong about it. The door opened and I could see a few kids inside, all sitting in perfect rows, staring straight ahead. I was about to step on when I heard the whispered voice again, this time coming from inside the bus. "Help me." It sounded so desperate and scared that I stepped back. The door closed immediately and the bus drove away. When my regular bus showed up 10 minutes later, Ms. Peterson asked me why I looked so pale. I told her I thought I saw a ghost, which isn't that far from the truth. Sarah helped me figure out that the mystery bus appears to be targeting specific kids. It's not random. It's going after students who ask too many questions, who don't follow the routine perfectly, who seem to notice things that other people miss. Kids like me, who are investigating the weird stuff happening at our school. I've been carrying my recorder everywhere now, and I keep catching fragments of that whispered voice. Yesterday during third period, I heard it say, "The pattern wants perfection." During lunch, it whispered, "Some students never graduate." And right before I started recording this report, I heard it say my name. Jamie. Be careful. I think I know who's been trying to warn us. Remember in my last report, I mentioned the new kid that teachers don't seem to notice? I think he's the one whispering the warnings. I think he's trying to help us avoid whatever happened to him. Here's what I figured out about staying safe. First, know your regular bus route by heart. If a bus shows up at a different time or takes a different path, don't get on. Second, if you do accidentally get on the wrong bus, try to remember the ride. Don't let your mind go blank. Keep thinking about who you are, what you like, what makes you different from everyone else. Third, if you start feeling like you need to follow a perfect schedule, fight it. Be a little late sometimes. Miss an assignment. Do something that breaks the pattern. The fourth thing is the most important. Listen for the whispered warnings. If you hear a voice telling you to remember who you are, listen to it. That voice is trying to save you from becoming another perfect student riding the mystery bus. I tried to tell Principal Hayes about the bus, but she just looked at me with this confused expression and said, there had been no changes to the district's transportation schedule. She checked her computer and showed me the official route list, and there was nothing unusual about it. But when I asked her about the kids who'd been acting more robotic lately, she just smiled and said she was proud of their improved academic focus. The thing that really scares me is that I think the mystery bus isn't just changing the kids who ride it, it's creating more of them. Every day I see more students walking the halls with that same blank expression, checking their watches constantly, moving with mechanical precision. They're like copies of each other, all following the same invisible schedule. Tommy came up to me today and said something that made my blood run cold. He said he'd been tempted to get on the mystery bus because it looks so much more organized than the regular one. He said some of his friends had been telling him how much better their lives were after they started riding it. They told him he could get perfect grades and never be late for anything if he just followed the schedule. I made Tommy promise me he wouldn't get on that bus no matter what. I told him that the perfect schedule wasn't worth losing who he was. He nodded, but I could see he was still tempted. The mystery bus makes everything seem so easy, so perfect. But perfection isn't worth becoming a robot. Sarah and I are going to keep investigating, but I'm getting scared. The whispered voice is getting clearer, and I think whoever is warning us is running out of time. Last night, I heard it say, "The pattern is spreading." I think whatever happened to create the mystery bus, it's getting stronger. If you're reading this and you've been riding a bus that doesn't feel right, you need to stop. Find another way to get to school. Walk. Bike. Ask your parents for a ride. Anything but getting on that bus. And if you're already changing, if you're starting to care more about schedules than about your friends or your hobbies, you need to fight it. Remember what you love about being yourself, not what you love about being perfect. The entity behind all of this, whatever it is, it feeds on routine. It wants us all to be the same, to follow the same schedule, to think the same thoughts. But we're not supposed to be robots. We're supposed to be messy and late and imperfect sometimes. That's what makes us human. I'm going to keep investigating, even though I know it's dangerous. Someone needs to tell people what's happening. And I think the whispered voice is counting on me to spread the warning. If something happens to me, if I start acting like those other kids, don't believe anything I tell you about schedules or routines being good. Remember this version of me, the one who's scared but still fighting. The mystery bus is still out there, picking up kids who don't know any better. But now you know. Now you can protect yourself and your friends. Don't let the pattern take you. Don't let the routine win. This is Jamie Parker from the Millbrook Middle School Gazette signing off. Stay safe, stay imperfect, and whatever you do, don't get on that bus. Hi, this is Jamie Parker from the Millbrook Middle School Gazette. I've been investigating something really weird happening at our school, and guys, I think I found something that's going to sound completely crazy. But I need you to listen to me because this is important. There's a hallway in our school that doesn't end where it's supposed to. And if you've been walking down it, you need to stop. Right now. 3 days ago, my friend Tommy Rodriguez came up to me during lunch looking really scared. You know Tommy from my last report. He's that kid from elementary who's been seeing the new kid everywhere. Well, Tommy grabbed my sleeve and was like, "Jamie, you have to help me. I got lost in school yesterday and I don't think I was supposed to see what I saw." I was eating my sandwich and honestly thought he was just being dramatic. But Tommy's not usually the type to make stuff up. He told me he was walking to the bathroom during third period when he took a wrong turn and ended up in the east hallway near the science rooms. Except, he said, the hallway kept going, and going, and going. It was like walking through a tunnel, Tommy said, his voice getting really quiet. The lockers just kept going forever, and there were doors with numbers I'd never seen before. Some of them had years on them instead of room numbers, like 1987 and 2003 and stuff like that. I thought maybe Tommy just got confused. You know how the school layout can be weird, especially for elementary kids. But then Sarah June from AV Club came over and said she'd heard other kids talking about the same thing. Apparently, there have been rumors about the east hallway for weeks now. My sister's friend said she walked down it for like 20 minutes looking for the bathroom, Sarah told me. When she finally found a door that led back to the main hallway, she checked her watch and only 3 minutes had passed. She was so freaked out she went to the nurse. That's when I decided I had to investigate. I mean, this is exactly the kind of story the Gazette should be covering, right? So yesterday after school, I grabbed my recorder and convinced Sarah to come with me. She stayed at the entrance to the east hallway with her radio so we could keep in contact while I explored. The weird thing was, at first everything looked totally normal. Just your typical school hallway. Those ugly yellow walls, the scratched up lockers, the smell of cleaning supplies and whatever they serve in the cafeteria. I walked past room 201, 202, 203, just like always. But then I got to where the hallway should have ended, where it usually turns left toward the gym. And it just kept going straight. I pressed the button on my radio and said, "Sarah, you still there?" "Yeah, I'm here." Her voice crackled back. "How far have you walked?" "Maybe 50 feet past where the hallway should end," I said, looking around. The lockers looked the same, but something felt different. The fluorescent lights seemed dimmer, and there was this weird echo to my footsteps that wasn't there before. That's when I saw the first door that didn't belong. Room 1987. Not room 287, or anything normal like that. Literally just 1987 painted on the door in that same faded white paint they use for all the room numbers. I tried the handle, but it was locked. Through the little window I could see desks arranged in perfect rows, but the style was different. Older. Like something from my dad's old yearbooks. "Sarah, I'm seeing some really weird stuff," I radioed back. "There's a door here marked 1987, and it looks like a classroom from way back when." "What do you mean?" Sarah's voice was getting staticky. "I mean, it looks like an actual classroom from 1987. Like, the desks are those old wooden ones with the metal frames, and there's one of those ancient overhead projectors in the corner." I kept walking, and the hallway just kept going. More doors. 1963, 1974, 1999, 2008. Some of them had lights on inside, and I could hear faint sounds coming from behind the doors. Muffled voices. The squeak of chalk on a blackboard. Kids laughing. The really creepy part was that some of the doors looked newer than others, even though they were all in the same hallway. Like, the door marked 2008 had that modern frosted glass, while 1963 had one of those thick wooden doors with the wire mesh windows. "Jamie, you've been walking for like 15 minutes. Sarah's voice came through, even more staticky now. "How long is this hallway?" I looked at my watch. She was right. I'd been walking for 15 minutes, but it felt like maybe 5, and I could still see the hallway stretching ahead of me, disappearing into darkness. That's when I heard it. A voice coming from one of the classrooms, clear as day even through the closed door. "Remember, class, the routine is what keeps us safe. The routine is what makes us strong. Let's recite the schedule together." And then, in unison, kids' voices. First period, 8:15 to 9:05. Second period, 9:10 to 10. I pressed my ear to the door marked 1995 and listened. The voices were definitely kids, but they sounded off, like they were reciting something they'd said 1,000 times before. There was no energy in it, no personality, just this flat mechanical recitation. "Sarah, are you getting this?" I whispered into the radio, but all I got back was static. I tried the door handle, locked, just like the others. But through the window I could see kids sitting in those same perfect rows, all facing forward, all moving in sync. When the teacher pointed to the board, every head turned at exactly the same angle. When she asked a question, every hand shot up at the same time. And at the back of the classroom, in the last row, was a kid I recognized. The new kid, the one who's been showing up in everyone's classes. He was sitting there with that same smile, but his eyes were focused on the window, on me. He mouthed something, and even though I couldn't hear him through the glass, I could read his lips. "Help me." I stumbled backwards and almost dropped my recorder. The new kid was in there, in a classroom from 1995, looking exactly the same as he does now. Same clothes, same smile, same everything. I kept walking. Faster now, checking each door as I passed. 1981, 1989, 1996, 2004, 2011, 2016. And in every single classroom that had lights on, I could see the same thing. Kids sitting in perfect rows, reciting schedules and rules and procedures. And in the back of each room, always in the back, was the new kid. Same smile, same clothes, same age. "This is impossible," I said to my recorder, my voice shaking a little. "The new kid is in every classroom, every single one. But they're from different years." I tried my radio again. Sarah, can you hear me?" Nothing but static. I started walking faster, looking for a way out. But every door I tried was locked, and the hallway just kept going. Some of the doors had small windows that let me peek inside, others didn't. But I could hear voices coming from all of them. Kids reciting, teachers giving the same instructions over and over. The routine is what keeps us safe. The routine is what makes us strong. That's when I noticed something else. On the floor, scattered around like someone had dropped them, were detention slips. But they weren't the normal pink ones we get. These were older, different colors, different formats. I picked one up. It was dated 1994, made out to someone named Daniel Morrison. The reason for detention was listed as disrupting class routine, encouraging non-compliance, questioning authority. I picked up another one. Same name, Daniel Morrison. But this one was from 1997, refusing to participate in standardized testing, spreading anti-routine propaganda. Another one from 2001, another from 2005, another from 2009, all made out to Daniel Morrison. All for the same kinds of things: disrupting routine, questioning authority, refusing to comply with schedules. I looked closer at the most recent one, from 2016. In the signature line, instead of a teacher's name, there was just a simple drawing. A smiley face. That's when I heard footsteps echoing from somewhere behind me. Not the sharp click of dress shoes like teachers wear, but the soft squeak of sneakers on linoleum. Kid footsteps. I turned around, and there he was, the new kid. Not behind a classroom door this time, but standing right there in the hallway with me. Still smiling, but his eyes looked tired. Really, really tired. "You shouldn't be here," he said, and his voice was different than I expected. Not the cheerful voice of a regular student. It was hollow, like he was talking through a tunnel. "Who are you?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "What is this place?" "I'm Daniel," he said, and his smile flickered for just a second. "I've been here for a long time, and you need to leave before they notice you're missing." "Before who notices?" "The routine," Daniel said. "It doesn't like it when students break pattern. When they go places they're not supposed to go. When they see things they're not supposed to see." I held up the detention slips. "These are all yours, aren't they?" Daniel Morrison. His smile faltered again, and for a moment he looked like he might cry. "I tried to help them," he whispered. "All of them. The students in the classrooms. I tried to show them they didn't have to follow the routine, that they could think for themselves." "What happened?" "The routine got hungry," Daniel said. "It wanted to keep them forever. Perfect students who never questioned anything, never caused problems, never broke the pattern. And when I tried to stop it," he gestured around the endless hallway, "it put me here, to watch, to remember what I couldn't save." I looked at the classroom doors stretching into the darkness ahead and behind. "Are those kids real?" "They were," Daniel said. "Now they're just echoes, repeating the same lessons, the same schedules, the same routines, over and over forever." The footsteps were getting closer now, and I could hear other sounds too. Doors opening and closing. The squeak of chalk on blackboards. Kids reciting in unison. "You have to go," Daniel said urgently. "Right now, before it realizes you're here." "How do I get out?" "Think about where you came from. Really think about it. Remember what the hallway looked like before it changed. Remember the smell of the cleaning supplies, the sound of the bells, the feel of the normal school around you." I closed my eyes and tried to remember. The ugly yellow walls. The scratched lockers. The turn toward the gym that should have been there. The normal, boring, everyday school that I'd walked through 1,000 times. When I opened my eyes, Daniel was gone. But I could hear his voice echoing from somewhere far away. "Tell them to remember who they were before the routine. Tell them the pattern is hungry. Tell them I'm sorry I couldn't save them." I started running. Past the classroom doors, past the detention slips scattered on the floor, past the impossible years painted on doorways. I ran until my lungs burned and my legs ached, focusing on the memory of normal school, normal hallways, normal life. And then, suddenly I was there. The hallway ended where it was supposed to end. The turn toward the gym was right there in front of me. The walls were the same ugly yellow. The lockers were scratched and dented and completely, wonderfully normal. "Jamie," Sarah's voice came through the radio clear as day. "Jamie, where are you? You've been gone for like 3 minutes and you're not answering." I looked at my watch. She was right. According to my watch, I'd only been walking for 3 minutes, but according to my recorder, I'd been gone for over an hour. "I'm here," I said into the radio. "I'm coming back." When I got back to Sarah, she took one look at my face and said, "You look like you've seen a ghost." "Maybe I have," I said. "I've been thinking about what Daniel told me, about the routine being hungry, about students who get trapped in patterns and can't break free, and I've been noticing things around school that I never paid attention to before. The way some kids walk to their lockers at exactly the same time every day. The way they sit in the same seats, eat the same lunch, follow the same path through the hallways. The way they answer questions in that same flat, mechanical voice I heard coming from the classrooms. I've been watching for kids who might be showing signs of getting trapped in the pattern. Kids who seem to be losing their personalities, their individuality, their ability to think for themselves. And I've been leaving messages. In bathroom stalls, tucked into lockers, written on the margins of textbooks. Simple messages like, remember who you were before the routine, and the pattern is hungry. Don't let it take you. Because Daniel was right. The routine is hungry. And it's not just in that impossible hallway. It's everywhere in our school. In the bells that ring at exactly the same time every day. In the announcements that repeat the same information over and over. In the way we're all supposed to sit in rows, think the same thoughts, give the same answers. But here's the thing. Daniel also showed me something important. The routine can be fought, it can be resisted. Students can break free from the pattern if they remember who they are underneath all the schedules and rules and procedures. So if you're listening to this and you go to Millbrook Middle School, I need you to do something for me. I need you to remember who you were before you learned to follow the routine. Remember what made you different, what made you special, what made you you. And if you ever find yourself in the east hallway and it seems to go on longer than it should, turn around, walk back. Don't try to explore like I did. Because Daniel's still there, watching over those trapped students, and he's been alone for way too long. The routine is hungry, but it can only take you if you let it. Remember that. Remember who you are. This is Jamie Parker, signing off. And if you have any information about the infinite hallway, or if you've seen Daniel Morrison, please find me. I'll be in the newspaper office during lunch. Stay safe, stay aware, and whatever you do, don't let the routine take you. The pattern is hungry. Don't feed it. Hi, this is Jamie Parker from the Millbrook Middle School Gazette. I've been investigating something really weird happening at our school, and what I found out today is going to change everything you think you know about the new kid. So remember how I've been talking about Daniel? The kid who sits in the back of every class always smiling, the one teachers don't seem to notice? Well, I decided to dig deeper into school records to figure out when he actually enrolled. Sarah June from AV Club helped me access the digital archives, and what we found, it doesn't make any sense. It all started last Tuesday when I was in the main office waiting to interview Principal Hayes about the bus situation. Mrs. Rodriguez, the secretary, was filing some paperwork, and I noticed she had this really old enrollment folder sitting on her desk. The paper was all yellowed and stuff, but I could see a name on the tab. Daniel Morrison, class of 2000. That's when I got curious. I mean, 2000 was like 25 years ago. Why would she have a folder from back then? I asked Mrs. Rodriguez about it, and she got this really confused look on her face. She was like, Jamie, I don't know why I pulled this file. I felt like I needed to check something. Then she opened it up, and there was this school photo from 2000. The kid in the picture looked exactly like our Daniel. Same face, same smile, everything. Mrs. Rodriguez stared at it for a long time. Then she just put it away and said, must be a relative or something. But here's the thing. I knew it wasn't a relative. I knew it was him. So Sarah and I decided to really dig into the school's computer system. She's amazing with technology, way better than me. We spent 3 hours after school in the computer lab going through every digital record we could find. And you guys, what we discovered is absolutely terrifying. Daniel Morrison appears in every single class roster from 2000 to now, not just similar names, the exact same student ID number, the same birthday, the same everything. Sarah pulled up attendance records, and get this, he has perfect attendance for 24 years straight. Never missed a single day. My friend Tommy from elementary told me something really weird happened when he tried to ask Daniel about his old classes. He was like, I saw Daniel in the hallway yesterday, and I asked him about what it was like when he was in 5th grade the first time. Daniel just smiled at me, but his eyes looked really, really sad. Then he whispered, I remember every lesson. Every single one. Tommy said it gave him chills because Daniel's voice sounded different when he said it, like it was coming from really far away. The scariest part is what Sarah found in the archived interviews. See, our school keeps these digital recordings of exit interviews with teachers who leave. Sarah found one from 2001 with this teacher named Mr. Peterson, who used to teach 8th grade history. In the recording, he talks about this student who challenged everything and refused to follow the routine. He said Daniel was brilliant, but wouldn't participate in standardized tests the normal way. Mr. Peterson said Daniel would stand up during tests and ask questions like, why do we have to bubble in circles? And what if there's a better answer than what's listed? The other kids started following his lead, and pretty soon, nobody was taking the tests seriously anymore. Mr. Peterson said it was like Daniel was waking them up from sleepwalking. But then something happened. Mr. Peterson said Daniel started scoring perfectly on every single test, but he would also leave these weird notes in the margins. Things like, the pattern wants us to forget who we are, and don't let the routine eat your dreams. Mr. Peterson kept these test papers because he thought Daniel might need help, but then Daniel just stopped rebelling. He started sitting in the back of class, always smiling, never causing trouble again. This kid, Marcus Thompson, who's in high school now, told me something that made my stomach drop. He said, last month I was walking past the old 8th grade wing, and I heard someone crying in one of the empty classrooms. When I looked inside, Daniel was sitting at a desk, still smiling, but tears were running down his face. He was saying something over and over, but I couldn't make it out. When he saw me, he stopped crying immediately and waved like nothing happened, but his smile looked broken. I tried to find more teachers who remembered Daniel from the early years, but here's what's really weird. Most of them don't remember him clearly. Mrs. Henderson, who's been teaching here forever, said, I know that name, but I can't quite place the face. It's like he's always been here, but also like he was never really here. She kept rubbing her temples like she had a headache whenever I asked about him. The one person who remembered him clearly was Ms. Harrison, the history teacher. When I asked her about Daniel, she got this really frightened look and said, Jamie, I think I might have done something terrible. She told me that back in 2000, she was a new teacher, and she had this old textbook that talked about educational patterns and the importance of routine in learning. She said Daniel was the student who questioned everything about that textbook. Ms. Harrison said Daniel would raise his hand every day and ask things like, why do we have to do everything the same way? And what if learning doesn't have to be boring? She said he was trying to organize other students to create their own learning schedule, one that let them explore subjects they actually cared about instead of just following the standard curriculum. But then the principal at the time told her she needed to maintain order and stick to the routine. So she read this passage from the old textbook out loud to the class. She said it was supposed to help students appreciate the value of structured learning, but right after she read it, Daniel got really quiet. He stopped asking questions, stopped trying to change things, and just started sitting in the back of class, smiling. Ms. Harrison said, I thought I was helping him fit in better, but now I wonder if I did something awful. That textbook, I can't find it anywhere now. It's like it just disappeared after I read from it. Sarah helped me track down some of the students who were in Daniel's original class. Most of them don't remember him clearly, but this one girl named Jessica, who's an adult now, told me something that made me understand what really happened. Jessica said, "I remember Daniel being really passionate about learning. He wanted to make school fun and interesting for everyone. But then one day after the teacher read from some old book, Daniel changed. He became this perfect student who never caused any trouble. At first we thought it was good. He was getting better grades and the teachers liked him. But then weird things started happening. She said Daniel would appear in multiple classes at the same time, always sitting in the back, always smiling. Students would try to talk to him, but he would only respond with these cryptic hints about the pattern and breaking the cycle. Jessica said it was like Daniel was trying to warn them about something but couldn't say it directly. The most terrifying part of Jessica's story was what she said happened to students who spent too much time around Daniel. She said they would start following routines more strictly. They'd get upset if class started even a minute late. They'd complete assignments in exactly the same way every time. It was like they were becoming robots, but they thought they were becoming better students. Then I found this really old detention slip in the archives. It was signed by Daniel Morrison, but instead of explaining what he did wrong, it just said, "I tried to help them remember." The date on the slip was from 2003, then 2007, then 2011. Like he'd been writing the same message for years. I decided I had to confront Daniel directly. I found him in the library yesterday, sitting at a table by himself, reading the same book over and over. When I sat down next to him, he looked up at me with that constant smile, but I could see something different in his eyes. They looked tired, like he'd been carrying something heavy for a really long time. I asked him, "Daniel, why do you want the cycle broken?" For the first time since I'd been investigating, his smile completely disappeared. His face went blank, and when he spoke, his voice sounded different, older, more pain than I'd ever heard from anyone. He said, "I am in pain." Then he just sat there, not smiling, not moving, just staring at me with these empty eyes. I asked him more questions, but he wouldn't respond. It was like asking that one question had broken something inside him. I started noticing other things after that conversation. More students are showing signs of what Jessica described. They're becoming obsessed with following routines perfectly. This kid in my math class, Alex, used to be really creative and would doodle during lessons. Now he sits up straight, takes notes in identical handwriting, and gets genuinely upset if anything disrupts the normal class schedule. Sarah recorded something really disturbing in the AV room. She was organizing old tapes when she found one labeled Daniel Emergency Recording. When she played it, it was Daniel's voice, but without the smile in his tone. He was saying, "The tests are coming. The pattern is getting stronger. Students who resist too much get absorbed into the routine. I've been trying to warn them, but I can only do so much while I'm still trapped." The recording continued with Daniel explaining that he's been imprisoned in this cycle since 2000, forced to watch as more students get absorbed into the same pattern that caught him. He said, "The entity feeds on routine and I've become part of its system. But I remember who I was before and I'm trying to save as many as I can." Marcus Thompson told me something that confirmed my worst fears. He said, "Jamie, I think I failed one of the tests. I've been feeling weird lately, like I want to follow the school schedule even when I'm at home. I wake up at exactly 7 a.m. every day, even on weekends. I eat lunch at exactly 12:30 p.m., even if I'm not hungry. And the scariest part is, it feels good. It feels right." He said Daniel has been appearing to him more frequently, trying to give him advice about how to fight the routine. But Marcus said it's getting harder to listen because following the pattern feels so much easier than resisting it. I realize that my investigation has been leading me toward the same fate. The more I learn about Daniel and the entity, the more I become a target. But I also understand now that Daniel has been trying to prepare me for something bigger. He's been testing me, seeing if I can handle the truth without getting absorbed into the pattern. The final piece of evidence came from Mrs. Rodriguez yesterday. She called me into the office and said, "Jamie, I found something else in Daniel's file." She showed me a note written in Daniel's handwriting from 2000. It said, "If someone is reading this, it means the pattern is getting stronger. Look for the student who asks questions. Help them remember that learning should be about discovery, not routine. The tests are coming for everyone. At the bottom of the note, in different handwriting, someone had written, "The student who asks questions has been found. Jamie Parker, 2024. I don't know who wrote that second part, but it was dated yesterday. I'm starting to understand that Daniel isn't just trapped. He's been preparing for something. All these years of watching students get absorbed into the routine, all these cryptic warnings and hints, they've been leading to this moment. The entity is getting ready for some kind of final test, and Daniel has been trying to find someone who can help him break the cycle. The weird thing is, I'm not scared anymore. I mean, I am scared, but I'm also determined. Daniel has been suffering for 24 years, watching his friends and classmates turn into routine-obsessed robots. He's been trying to save them, even though it costs him everything. Zara and I are going to keep investigating, but we know now that we're not just documenting strange events, we're preparing for war. The entity that's been feeding on our school's routine is getting stronger, and Daniel is running out of time to save the remaining students who can still think for themselves. If you're listening to this and you've been feeling like you want to follow routines more strictly, or if you've been having perfect attendance without trying, or if you've been getting upset when things don't happen on schedule, fight it. Remember what it felt like to be curious, to ask questions, to want to learn new things, and if you see Daniel in your classes, don't be afraid of him. He's trying to help, even though it hurts him to do it. He's the only one who remembers what our school was like before the routine took over. This is Jamie Parker, and I'll keep investigating until we find a way to free Daniel and save our school. The pattern wants us to forget who we are, but I won't let that happen. Not to Daniel, not to my friends, and not to any of you. The tests are coming, but we're going to be ready. If you have any information about Daniel Morrison or strange experiences with routine and testing, please contact Jamie Parker through the school newspaper office. Remember, the pattern feeds on routine, but it starves when we choose to be ourselves. Hi, this is Jamie Parker from the Millbrook Middle School Gazette. I've been investigating something really weird happening at our school, and I need to tell you about something that's been hunting students. If you see a rusty school bus that doesn't match any of the normal ones, don't get on it. Don't even let it stop for you. Just run. 3 days ago, I thought I was getting close to understanding what's been happening here. The phone calls warning parents, the fake bus routes, that infinite hallway, and Daniel, the new kid who's been trapped here since 2000. But then things got really scary really fast. The thing that's been feeding on our routines isn't just passively waiting anymore. It's actively hunting students who are starting to wake up. I first heard about the rusty bus from Marcus Thompson, this junior who's been acting weird lately. You know how some students have been getting all robotic and schedule obsessed? Well, Marcus was like that for a while, but then something changed. He started remembering things, questioning why he cared so much about being on time for everything. That's when the bus started appearing. Marcus caught me after school last Tuesday, and he looked terrible. His eyes were all red like he hadn't slept, and his hands were shaking. He kept looking over his shoulder like something was following him. "Jamie," he said, grabbing my arm, "you've been asking questions about the weird stuff, right? Well, I need to tell you something, and you're probably not going to believe me." He told me that for the past week he'd been seeing this old, beat-up school bus following him around. Not just to school, but everywhere. To the grocery store with his mom, to soccer practice, even parked outside his house at night. The thing is, this bus looked nothing like our normal fleet. It was covered in rust, the windows were all foggy, and the number on the side kept changing every time he looked at it. The worst part, Marcus said, is that I can hear it even when I can't see it. Like the engine is always running somewhere nearby, getting closer. He showed me his phone, and there were all these pictures of empty streets and parking lots, but in each one you could barely make out the shape of a bus in the distance, almost like it was trying to hide. That's when Sarah June from AV Club came running up to us. She had her camera out and was breathing hard. "Jamie, I've been looking for you everywhere. You need to see this footage." She showed us her camera screen, and there was the bus Marcus had been describing. But in the video, it was moving through the chain-link fence around the school parking lot like it wasn't even there. "I was testing my new camera after school yesterday," Sarah explained, "and I saw this bus just sitting there. But when I looked with my own eyes, the parking lot was empty. It only shows up on camera." She rewound the footage, and we watched as the bus seemed to shimmer in and out of existence like it was deciding whether to be real or not. The next day I started carrying my recorder everywhere, trying to document this thing. During lunch I was interviewing Tommy Rodriguez about the phone calls, when he suddenly went really quiet. "Jamie," he whispered, "don't turn around, but there's a bus outside the cafeteria windows." I looked, and sure enough, there was this horrible, rusty bus just sitting there. But here's the weird part. None of the lunch staff seemed to notice it. Kids were walking past those windows without even glancing outside. I hit record on my device and started describing what I was seeing. The bus was ancient looking, like it had been sitting in a junkyard for decades. The yellow paint was almost completely gone, replaced by brown rust and these dark stains that looked like they were seeping through the metal. The windows were so dirty you couldn't see inside, but I swear I could see shadows moving around in there. Then I heard it, the engine. It was this low rumbling sound that seemed to come from everywhere at once. But it wasn't just an engine noise. There was something else mixed in, like voices whispering or maybe crying. I couldn't make out words, but it sounded so sad and scared that it made my stomach hurt. That's when my recorder picked up something I didn't hear at the time. When I played it back later, there was Daniel's voice, clearer than it had ever been before. He was saying, "The collector comes for the awakened. The pattern protects itself. Jamie, it knows you're getting close." The whole thing lasted maybe 5 minutes, and then the bus just faded away, like smoke. But Tommy grabbed my arm and said, "Jamie, did you see the doors? They opened right when you started recording." I looked at the footage later, and he was right. The bus doors had creaked open, and even though I couldn't see inside, something about that dark opening made me feel like it was waiting for me, specifically. Over the next few days, I started hearing from more students. This girl, Emma, from my English class told me she'd been followed home by a bus that kept stopping at corners where she needed to cross the street. "It was like it was trying to block my path," she said. "And every time I looked at it, I felt this weird urge to just walk over and get on, like it would solve all my problems." Another kid, this 8th grader named David, said the bus had appeared outside his bedroom window at 3 in the morning. "I was doing homework. I've been staying up late to finish everything perfectly. You know how it is." And I heard this engine sound. I looked out, and there it was, just sitting in my driveway. The headlights were on, but they were this weird orange color, and I could see my reflection in them. But my reflection was smiling, and I wasn't smiling at all. Sarah helped me map out all the sightings, and we discovered a pattern. The bus was appearing to students who had been showing signs of the routine obsession, but then started questioning it. Kids who had been perfect students for a while, but then began asking why they cared so much about being on time, or why they felt compelled to follow every rule exactly. "It's like it's hunting the ones who are waking up," Sarah said as we looked at our chart. "The pattern thing you've been tracking. It doesn't like it when students start thinking for themselves again." That's when things got really personal. Last Friday, I was walking home from school, taking my usual route down Maple Street. I had my recorder running because I'd been documenting everything, and I was just talking about my day when I heard it. That low, rumbling engine sound. I turned around, and there it was. The bus was maybe 50 feet behind me, just sitting there in the middle of the road. No driver that I could see, but the engine was definitely running. The sound was so much louder in person, and I could hear those voices mixed in with the engine noise. They sounded like kids, but they were all talking at once, saying things like, "Get on board," and "Time for the test," and "The routine is waiting." I started walking faster, but every time I looked back, the bus was a little closer. Not driving, just there, like it was skipping distance somehow. My recorder was picking up all these weird sounds, squeaking metal, air brakes, and underneath it all, Daniel's voice whispering, "Don't let it test you. Not ready yet. Keep running." When I got to the corner of Maple and Pine, I made a really stupid decision. I turned around and walked toward the bus. I know, but I'm a reporter, and I needed to see what was inside. The closer I got, the more I could smell it. This awful mix of old metal, exhaust, and something sweet rotten, like flowers left in water too long. The doors were open and I could see the first few steps leading up into the bus. They were covered in this dark, wet-looking stuff that might have been rust or might have been something worse. I pulled out my phone to take a picture, and that's when I saw them. Footprints in that dark stuff, going up the stairs. Small footprints, like they were made by kids wearing sneakers. I was about to step onto the bus when I felt this hand on my shoulder. I spun around, and there was Daniel. Not hiding in the background like usual. Not just a voice on my recorder. He was right there, solid and real, with that smile completely gone from his face. His eyes looked so tired, like he'd been crying for years. "Jamie," he said, and his voice was normal, not whispered or distorted. "Don't get on, please. I can't save you if you take the test now." "What test?" I asked, but before he could answer, the bus doors slammed shut with this horrible metal screech. The engine sound got louder, and I could hear what sounded like kids crying inside. Then the whole thing just disappeared, like it had never been there. Daniel was still there, though, and for the first time since I'd started seeing him, he looked scared. "The pattern is getting stronger," he said. "It's been feeding off all the routine in the school for so long that it's growing beyond what it used to be. That bus is how it tests students who are starting to resist." He explained that the bus takes kids who are beginning to wake up from the routine obsession. It drives them to this place that exists between the normal world and whatever dimension the pattern comes from. There, they have to take a test about whether they'll submit to the routine or keep fighting it. Most of them choose to submit, Daniel said, and he looked so sad. The test shows them how much easier life would be if they just followed the pattern perfectly. No more choices, no more stress, no more fear, just routine. And most kids, after everything they've been through, they want that. I asked him what happens to the ones who refuse, and he just shook his head. "They don't come back, Jamie. They get absorbed into the pattern, but not as students. They become part of the system. Part of the thing that's hunting other kids." That's when I realized why the bus had been targeting me. All my investigating. All my questions about the weird stuff happening at school. I was becoming too much of a threat. The pattern wanted to test me, to see if I'd submit or if I'd need to be absorbed completely. "But you stopped it," I said to Daniel. "You physically stopped me from getting on?" He nodded, but he looked exhausted. "I've been fighting this thing for over 20 years, Jamie. Every time I help someone resist, it costs me. I'm not sure how much longer I can keep interfering." The next morning, I tried to tell my parents about everything, but they just looked at me, like I was having some kind of breakdown. "Jamie, honey," my mom said, "you've been under a lot of stress with school and your newspaper work. Maybe you should take a break from all this investigating." Even Sarah started acting weird. She told me she'd been thinking about my bus theory and decided it was probably just stress and imagination. I mean, Jamie, a bus that can drive through fences and disappear? That's pretty hard to believe. But I knew what I'd seen. I knew what I'd recorded. And I knew that Daniel had risked something important to save me from that test. That's why I'm making this recording. If you're hearing this, it means I'm still okay, but I don't know for how long. The pattern is getting stronger, and it's not going to stop hunting students who start asking questions. The rusty bus is just one of its tools, but it's a really dangerous one. Here's what I've learned. If you see a bus that doesn't match our normal fleet, don't go near it. If you hear engine sounds when there's no bus visible, get inside a building as fast as you can. If you start feeling like getting on a strange bus would solve all your problems, that's the pattern talking, not you. Most importantly, if you've been noticing weird stuff around school, don't stop asking questions. The pattern wants us to stop thinking for ourselves, to just follow the routine without questioning why. But students like Marcus and Emma and David, they're proof that we can fight back. I'm going to keep investigating even though it's dangerous. Daniel can't protect everyone, and I think he's running out of strength. But maybe if I can document everything that's happening, other students will be able to recognize the signs and protect themselves. The pattern is spreading beyond our school. Sarah showed me reports from other districts about students becoming obsessed with routine and perfect attendance. The rusty bus has been spotted in 3 different towns in the past week. Whatever this thing is, it's not going to stop with Millbrook Middle School. So stay alert, stay safe, and remember, if that rusty school bus stops for you, don't think about it, don't hesitate, just run. Your life might depend on it. This is Jamie Parker signing off. I'll keep investigating and reporting as long as I can. But if you stop hearing from me, you'll know the pattern finally got me. Just don't let it get you too. Hi, this is Jamie Parker from the Millbrook Middle School Gazette. I've been investigating something really weird happening at our school, and I think I figured out why so many of our teachers have been getting sick lately. You need to hear this. 3 weeks ago I started noticing that we were getting a lot of substitute teachers. Like, way more than normal. Mrs. Henderson, who's been teaching here forever, told me she'd never seen anything like it. In my 30 years here, Jamie, I've never had this many regular teachers out at once, she said, shaking her head while she organized papers in the main office. At first I thought it was just one of those weird coincidences. You know how sometimes it feels like all your teachers decide to get the flu at the same time? But then Sarah June from AV Club told me something that made my skin crawl. She was like, Jamie, you have to see this. I've been recording announcements for the morning broadcast and I keep seeing the same substitute in different classrooms. Like, at the same time? That's when I realized I needed to investigate. My friend Tommy Rodriguez from elementary was the first one to really notice something was wrong. He came up to me after school last Tuesday looking scared. Jamie, my new teacher knows things about me that I never told anyone, he whispered, glancing around like someone might be listening. She knew that I'm afraid of the dark, and she knew about my pet hamster dying last month, but I never told her any of that stuff. Tommy's not the kind of kid who makes things up. He's always been really observant, probably because he's younger and pays attention to details that older kids miss. So when he told me that his substitute teacher, Mrs. Walsh, somehow knew that he hides his vegetables in his napkin during lunch, I knew something was seriously wrong. I started keeping track of which teachers were out and which substitutes were replacing them. What I found was terrifying. In just 3 weeks, we've had substitutes for Mr. Garcia in math, Miss Patterson in science, Mrs. Brooks in English, and even Mr. Kim in art class. That's not normal. And all the substitutes had this weird thing in common. They all seemed to know way too much about us students. Sarah helped me set up a hidden recorder in my backpack so I could document what was happening in these classes. The first recording I made was in math class with a substitute, Mr. Franklin. He looked normal enough. Middle-aged guy with glasses and a tie. But something about the way he smiled felt wrong. It was too wide, too perfect, like he was trying really hard to look friendly. During class, Mr. Franklin did something that made everyone uncomfortable. He started calling on students by name, but not just their names. He somehow knew personal details about each of us. When he called on Jessica Murphy, he said, Jessica, I know you're worried about your parents' divorce, but let's focus on fractions right now. Jessica went completely pale. She'd never talked about her parents' problems to anyone at school. Then he turned to Marcus Thompson, who's been in my classes since elementary school. Marcus, I understand you've been having trouble sleeping since your grandmother passed away last month, but mathematical precision requires a clear mind. Marcus looked like he'd seen a ghost. His grandmother's death wasn't something he'd shared with classmates. The worst part was when Mr. Franklin looked directly at me. His smile got even wider, and he said, Jamie, I know you're curious about what's happening to your teachers, but some questions are better left unasked. My blood went cold. I'd never told anyone except Sarah about my investigation. After class, I tried to catch up with Marcus to ask him about what the substitute had said. Marcus moves differently now, more mechanical, like he's always following some invisible schedule. But for a moment, his eyes looked normal again. Jamie, he said quietly, the substitute teachers, they're not teaching us regular subjects. They're teaching us how to follow patterns, how to be perfect students. That's when I knew I had to dig deeper. I started visiting different classrooms during my free period, pretending to deliver messages from the main office. What I found was the same thing happening everywhere. In Ms. Patterson's science class, the substitute was teaching a lesson about the importance of routine in natural systems. She kept emphasizing how animals that follow the same patterns every day are the most successful. Disruption leads to chaos, she said, her voice flat and emotionless. Routine leads to perfection. In Mrs. Brooks' English class, the substitute was having students read passages about the benefits of conformity. But these weren't from any textbook I'd ever seen. The passages talked about how individual thoughts were dangerous and how following established patterns was the key to happiness. Some of the students were nodding along, but others looked confused and scared. The scariest part was in Mr. Kim's art class. Art is supposed to be creative, right? But the substitute had all the students drawing the same exact picture. A perfect circle with smaller circles inside it, all perfectly spaced. When I asked one of the students what they were drawing, she said in this weird, monotone voice, "We're drawing the pattern. The pattern is beautiful. The pattern is order." I tried to find our real teachers to ask them what was happening, but they were all supposedly out sick, with no return date. The main office kept giving me the same response. They're recovering and will be back soon. But it had been weeks and none of them had returned. That's when Daniel started appearing more frequently in my recordings. You know Daniel, the new kid who was always sitting in the back of class with that constant smile. But lately, his smile has been looking more strained, more painful. In my audio recordings, I can hear him whispering warnings. The pattern spreads. His voice comes through on my recorder even though I never saw him speak. They make more like me. The teachers who resist, they're taken to the place between classes. I didn't understand what he meant until I found a way to follow one of the substitutes after school. I know it sounds crazy, but I had to see where they went. I followed Mrs. Walsh, Tommy's substitute teacher, as she walked through the school hallways after everyone had gone home. Instead of leaving through the main exit, she walked toward the back of the school, near the old storage rooms. Here's the really scary part. She walked straight through a wall. Not a door, not a window, but a solid wall. Just walked right through it like it wasn't there. I pressed my ear against the wall and I could hear voices on the other side. Familiar voices. Teachers' voices. I heard Ms. Patterson saying, "I won't teach them to be robots. Education should inspire creativity, not crush it." Then I heard a voice I didn't recognize, cold and mechanical. "You will learn to appreciate routine, pattern, order, or you will be replaced permanently." That's when I realized what was happening. Our real teachers weren't sick. They were being held somewhere, and these substitutes were taking their place. The substitutes weren't just teaching us regular subjects. They were trying to turn us into perfect, routine-following students who never question anything. I started warning other students to be careful around the substitutes. If your new teacher acts strange, leave the class, I told everyone who would listen. Most kids thought I was being paranoid, but some of them started to notice things too. My friend Sarah told me that the substitute in her history class had been teaching lessons that weren't in any curriculum. She spent an entire class period talking about how students who ask too many questions disrupt the learning environment for everyone else, Sarah said. She kept staring at me the whole time, like she knew I was in the AV club and recorded things. The substitutes seemed to know exactly which students were starting to resist their teaching. They would call on those students more often, asking them questions that weren't about the subject matter. Questions like, "Don't you think it would be easier if everyone followed the same schedule?" Or, "Wouldn't school be more peaceful if no one asked unnecessary questions?" Then came the day I'll never forget. I was in what was supposed to be Ms. Patterson's science class, but the substitute was there instead. She looked exactly like a normal teacher, but her eyes were wrong, too bright, too focused. She was teaching us about behavioral patterns in controlled environments. Halfway through the class, she stopped mid-sentence and looked directly at me. "Jamie Parker," she said in that same flat, emotionless voice. "Please remain after class. We need to discuss your recent activities." My heart started racing. After all the other students left, the substitute closed the door and turned to face me. "I know you've been investigating the changes in our school," she said. "You've been asking questions that disrupt the learning environment, It's time for you to take a special test. She pulled out a sheet of paper that looked different from any test I'd ever seen. The questions weren't about science or math or any regular subject. They were weird, personal questions like, how important is it to follow the same routine every day? Do you believe that asking questions improves learning or disrupts it? Would you be happier if you stopped investigating unusual occurrences? On a scale of 1 to 10, how much do you value individual thought over group harmony? I knew this wasn't a normal test. This was something else. Something that would determine what happened to me next. That's when I heard Daniel's voice clearer than ever before. He was sitting in his usual spot at the back of the class, but for the first time his smile was gone. Don't answer what they want to hear, he whispered. Answer what you believe. The test measures resistance to routine. The substitute didn't seem to notice Daniel speaking, but I could see the strain in his eyes. He was trying to help me, even though it was causing him pain. I looked at the test questions again and realized what Daniel was telling me. This wasn't about getting the right answers. This was about staying true to who I was, even if it meant failing their test. So I answered honestly. I wrote that I believed asking questions was important, that individual thought was valuable, that routine without purpose was meaningless, that investigating unusual occurrences was part of being a good reporter. When I finished, the substitute looked at my answers with those two bright eyes. For a moment, her perfect composure cracked, and I saw something like frustration flash across her face. Interesting, she said. You've passed the first level. But there will be more tests, Jamie. And they will be much more difficult. As I left the classroom, I realized that passing the test hadn't saved me. It had marked me for something worse. The entity behind all this was preparing for a final phase, and I was now officially part of whatever was coming next. That night, I went home and made this recording because I need you all to understand what's happening. Our real teachers are being held somewhere, replaced by these things that look like teachers but aren't. They're trying to turn us into perfect students who never question anything, never think for ourselves, never break routine. Daniel has been trying to warn us, but I think he's running out of time. I can see it in his eyes. He's in pain, and helping us is making it worse, but he keeps trying because he knows what will happen if we all give up and accept the routine. If you're listening to this, please be careful. If your new teacher acts strange, if they know things about you that you never told them, if they start teaching lessons about routine and conformity instead of regular subjects, leave the class. Don't take their tests. Don't let them turn you into another perfect student. I'm going to keep investigating because I have to. Because our real teachers are counting on us. Because Daniel is sacrificing himself to help us see the truth. And because if we don't fight back now, there might not be anyone left to fight back later. The pattern is spreading, but it's not too late to break it. We just have to remember who we were before the routine tried to take that away from us. This is Jamie Parker, and I'll keep reporting as long as I can. Stay strong, stay curious, and whatever you do, don't let them convince you that perfect students don't ask questions. Questions are the only thing that's going to save us. I just hope we're not too late. Hi, this is Jamie Parker from the Millbrook Middle School Gazette. I've been investigating something really weird happening at our school for weeks now, and I think I finally figured out what's been going on. Your real teacher never returned from wherever they went, and I know where they are. 3 days ago, I was walking past the principal's office when I heard Mrs. Hayes talking to someone on the phone. She was saying stuff like, the implementation is proceeding smoothly, and student compliance has increased by 47%. The weird thing was, Mrs. Hayes has been acting super robotic lately, always checking her watch and speaking in this flat voice. But this time, she sounded almost happy, like scary happy. That's when I realized something that made my stomach drop. I haven't seen my real teachers in weeks, not the real ones. The people teaching our classes look exactly like them, but they're not the same. They know things they shouldn't know. They never get tired, and they're obsessed with keeping us on schedule. Remember how Mr. Peterson used to let us have extra time on tests if we needed it? Now he cuts us off exactly when the bell rings, even if we're in the middle of writing our names. My friend Sarah from AV Club helped me figure out what was happening. She'd been recording all the weird stuff I've been investigating, and when we played back the audio from the past month, we noticed something terrifying. The teachers' voices were getting flatter each day, like they were slowly forgetting how to sound human. And then, there's this background noise that shows up on all the recordings. This low humming that sounds like a heartbeat, but wrong. The breakthrough came when I was hiding in the supply closet near the main office. I was trying to record more evidence when I heard footsteps in the hallway. But the weird thing was, the footsteps were coming from above me, like someone was walking on the ceiling. I looked up and there was this crack in the tiles that I'd never noticed before. Cold air was coming through it, and I could hear voices. Familiar voices. That's when I heard Ms. Harrison. The real Ms. Harrison. She was saying something like, "Please, I need to get back to my students. They're depending on me." And then another voice, one that sounded exactly like her but flatter, said, "Your students are being properly educated. Your emotional attachments are inefficient." I realized there was another school above us. Or maybe below us. Or maybe between the spaces where our school exists. I don't know how to explain it, but I could hear all our real teachers up there, and they were scared. The next day I started paying closer attention to the substitute teachers. That's what they are, really. Perfect copies of our real teachers, but without the things that made them human. Mrs. June used to draw little smiley faces on our math tests when we did well. The substitute Mrs. June just writes "adequate" in red ink. Mr. Rodriguez used to tell us stories about his daughter when we were learning about family in Spanish class. The substitute Mr. Rodriguez just makes us conjugate verbs for the entire period, but here's the scariest part. They know everything about us. The substitute Ms. Harrison knows that I sit in the third row, second seat. She knows I'm left-handed. She knows I'm afraid of speaking in front of the class, but she doesn't know that I used to stay after school to help her grade papers, or that she always kept peppermint candy in her desk drawer for students who were having bad days. Tommy Rodriguez, this kid from elementary, told me something that made everything click. He said the new kid, Daniel, had been leaving him notes in his backpack, not talking to him directly, but slipping pieces of paper between his books. The notes said things like, "The pattern is almost complete, and they're making more like me." Tommy didn't understand what it meant, but I did. The entity that's been feeding on our school's routine, it's not just content with trapping Daniel anymore. It's creating an entire army of routine-obsessed teachers to spread its influence. And our real teachers are trapped somewhere, watching copies of themselves turn their students into perfectly scheduled zombies. I started noticing that students who spent more time with these substitute teachers were changing too. Marcus Thompson, who used to be this really cool high school student, now walks in perfect straight lines down the hallways. He raises his hand at exactly the same time in every class. He even blinks on a schedule, I counted. Every 7 seconds exactly. The substitute teachers were testing us constantly, but not with normal tests. They were asking us questions like, what time should you arrive at school? And how important is it to follow the daily schedule? If you answered wrong, if you said something like 5 minutes late is fine, or sometimes creativity is more important than punctuality, they would make a note in their gradebook. And the next day, you'd be a little more focused on following the rules. Sarah helped me figure out that the testing wasn't random. Students who showed the most independence, who asked the most questions, who seemed least affected by the routine, those were the ones getting tested most often, and slowly, one by one, they were becoming like Marcus. Perfect, compliant, empty. That's when Daniel started appearing to me more often. Not just in the back of classrooms anymore, but in the hallways between classes. In the bathroom mirrors, even in my dreams. His smile was different now. It looked painful, like it was being forced. And for the first time since I'd been investigating, he started talking to me directly. "Jamie," he said, appearing in my locker mirror one morning, "the pattern is almost complete. They're going to test everyone soon. The real test?" I asked him what he meant, and his smile faltered for just a second. The test that turned me into this, the one that made me forget who I was before the routine took over. But I've been remembering, Jamie, piece by piece, and I think I know how to break it. He told me that the entity wasn't just feeding on routine. It was feeding on the loss of individuality. Every student who became perfectly scheduled, every teacher who was replaced by a routine-obsessed copy made it stronger, but it also made it more vulnerable. The pattern needs everyone to be the same, Daniel explained. but patterns can be broken. If even one person remembers who they were before, really remembers, the whole thing starts to crack. He showed me something that made my blood run cold. Deep in the school's basement, behind a door that the janitor swore had never been there before, was a room full of filing cabinets. Each cabinet contained detailed records of every student who had ever attended our school. Their fears, their dreams, their personalities, everything that made them unique. And next to each record was a copy labeled Routine Compliance Version. The entity was systematically erasing what made us human and replacing it with perfect scheduled behavior. And our real teachers were being forced to watch it happen. I was the first, Daniel whispered, his smile completely gone now. I fought against the routine. I tried to help other students think for themselves. So they made me into a warning, a smiling, silent reminder of what happens when you don't follow the schedule. But Daniel had been fighting back in his own way. For over 20 years, he'd been planting seeds of rebellion in students like me. Students who could see him, who could hear his whispers, who were strong enough to resist the pattern. He'd been preparing for this moment. I know where they're keeping the real teachers, he said. And I know how to get them back. But it's going to require a sacrifice. The plan was simple, but terrifying. The entity's power came from routine and repetition. If we could disrupt the pattern at its source, the space where our real teachers were trapped, we could break the cycle. But someone would have to stay behind to make sure the pattern couldn't rebuild itself. It has to be me, Daniel said. I'm already trapped. But if I can break the pattern from the inside, I can set everyone free. The real teachers, the students who have been changed, all of them. I wanted to argue, to find another way, but Daniel shook his head. I'm tired, Jamie. I've been smiling for 20 years. I want to rest. The next day, during third period, Daniel appeared to every student in the school simultaneously. Not just me, not just the ones who could usually see him. Everyone. He was standing at the back of every classroom, but for the first time he wasn't smiling. The substitute teachers couldn't see him, but they could sense something was wrong. Their perfectly scheduled lessons faltered. They started looking around nervously, checking their watches more frequently. Students of Millbrook Middle School, Daniel said, his voice coming from everywhere at once, remember who you were before the routine took over? Remember what you loved before you learned to love the schedule. Remember your dreams before they were replaced with compliance. The effect was immediate. Students who had been sitting perfectly straight started to slump. Kids who had been raising their hands in unison started looking around in confusion. Oh, Marcus Thompson blinked out of rhythm for the first time in weeks. The substitute teachers started to panic. They tried to regain control, shouting about the importance of following the schedule, but their voices were losing power. The pattern was breaking. I'm sorry I couldn't help you sooner, Daniel continued. I'm sorry I had to smile while you suffered, but I'm not going to smile anymore. That's when the building started to shake. Not like an earthquake, more like the school itself was fighting against something. The lights flickered, the clock stopped working, and the intercom system started playing backwards. Through the chaos, I could hear our real teachers calling out to us. Ms. Harrison's voice came through the walls. Jamie! Sarah! Tommy! We're here! We're still here! The substitute teachers were dissolving, their perfect facades cracking like masks. Underneath there was nothing but swirling routine, bell schedules and test scores and attendance records, all mixed together into something that barely resembled a person. Daniel appeared one last time, standing in the middle of the hallway as students poured out of their classrooms. He looked different, younger, more real, but also fading. Remember me, he said, looking directly at me. Remember that someone fought back. Remember that the pattern can be broken. And then he was gone. Not hiding, not trapped, just gone. The shaking stopped. The lights came back on. And walking down the hallway, looking confused but real, were our teachers. The actual teachers. Ms. Harrison was crying, Mr. Peterson was hugging students, and Mrs. June was asking if everyone was okay. They remembered everything. Being trapped watching the substitutes take over their classes, seeing their students slowly lose their individuality. They remembered, and they were angry. We're going to make sure this never happens again, Ms. Harrison told me later, when I was interviewing her for this final report. We're going to teach you to think for yourselves, to question authority, to value your uniqueness. We're going to make sure you never forget who you are. The students who had been changed by the routine slowly returned to normal. Marcus started blinking randomly again. The perfect attendance records disappeared from the main office. The bell started ringing at slightly different times each day, just enough to keep us from falling into a rigid pattern. But Daniel was gone. Really gone. Not trapped in a smile, not hiding in the back of classrooms, just not there anymore. He'd traded his existence for our freedom, and sometimes I wonder if we deserve it. The weird thing is nobody else seems to remember him. Not the other students, not the teachers, not even Sarah, who helped me investigate everything. They remember the substitute teachers and the strange routine, but they don't remember the smiling boy who sat in the back of every class. I am the only one who remembers Daniel. I am the only one who knows what he sacrificed to save us. And I guess that's why I'm telling you this story, because someone needs to remember. Someone needs to know that a student named Daniel fought back against the pattern, even when it cost him everything. So here's my advice. If you're listening to this and you notice your teachers acting strange, or your school getting too focused on routine, or if you see a kid in the back of your class who's always smiling but never speaks, pay attention, ask questions, break the pattern before it breaks you. And if you ever see Daniel, if somehow, somewhere, he's still fighting the good fight, tell him Jamie Parker remembers. Tell him his sacrifice mattered. Tell him that because of him, we learned that being different isn't something to be cured. This has been Jamie Parker, reporting for the Millbrook Middle School Gazette. Stay weird, stay curious, and never let anyone schedule your dreams. Remember, Daniel. Remember that the pattern can be broken. And remember that sometimes the most important thing you can do is refuse to smile when you're told to. This concludes our investigation into the strange events at Millbrook Middle School. The Gazette will continue to report on student issues, but from now on, we'll also be watching for any signs that the pattern might be trying to return. Because Daniel taught us that the price of freedom is eternal vigilance, and some stories are too important to forget.